All right, let's get started. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you so much to Sikh Heritage Month for having Abby and myself here. We are just honored to be here today talking about things that are just very important to us and topics that we think are just very important for our community specifically. Before we start, I just want to give a little introduction as to who I am. I know we see some familiar faces, some new friends. My name is Puneet Shoker. I am a fourth year, going into my fourth year at chiropractic school here in Toronto. I'm just starting my clinical internship at St. Michael's Hospital. And I have been involved in healthcare for, I honestly can't remember. I've honestly sparked an interest specifically in the socioeconomic implications of healthcare within minority communities. And being from a Sikh background myself, I've had a particular interest in how that has affected our South Asian population. So that's kind of where my expertise lie. And, you know, each day working within our community, I'm from Mississauga, working within my community, I get new expertise and new information that I would love to be sharing with you guys today. So Avi, you want to give an introduction for yourself?
Yeah, quick introduction about me, guys. Some of you may know me from the past. I have done a couple events with Sikh Heritage Month in the past few years. But quickly, I'm a former athlete who's had a passion for self-improvement and training really my whole life. And that led me down this unique path of learning, where I actually enrolled in kinesiology and health science, which is the study of human movement. And during my undergrad is where I really started to learn and understand how important movement actually is, you know, overall in terms of improving health and wellness. And during my undergrad is where I made the decision that I wanted to make a difference in the health of my community and take matters into my own hand. So, you know, with all the knowledge that I was getting, I wanted to see if I could really make a difference. And that's when I chose to just become a physical educator or strength trainer. And I've been in the field of personal training now for the past 8 years, and I've been an active voice in my community. I really am looking forward to sharing some of my thoughts today with you guys, and truly appreciate whoever's here to listen.
Awesome. So I think today when Abby and I were thinking about what it is that we wanted to focus on, I think when it comes to the topic of health and wellness, there's just so many opinions and so much information out there that it kind of gets hard to navigate yourself through. And I think that's where today we're just going to be focusing specifically on heart health and what the implication of heart health is within our community, because the reality is that we see it a lot in our community, in our South Asian community, and there are huge roles and implications of those factors of heart health. And Abby and myself, we've been working with the community for a while now, so you know we've seen a lot of community members, and you know and we've been actually lucky to be able to help them. So we're hoping today that we're able to give you guys some information. Some of it may be content heavy, so if you have a notebook, make some notes down. If you have any questions throughout the thing, please feel free to add it in the comments below. And by any means, if we're not able to address any of those comments or questions that you may have, I have pinned our IG handles to the comments below there. So just send us a message, send us a DM, and we'd love to reach out with you guys.
Perfect. Yep. Shall I begin, Pete?
Yeah, go ahead, take it away.
Perfect. So we're going to start today's discussion with just providing a little framework and I guess a little history lesson on physical culture. So this is something that I'm big on, and it's going to just provide context for the rest of the talk. And ultimately, I just think it's really important for us to, as a people, just understand the big picture. So when we're studying the history of physical culture globally, we can safely and actually accurately say that people all over the world were generally a lot more active in the past versus now. Given that this is Sikh Heritage Month, I want to use the classic example of farming. So farming, which was or still is present in our heritage, is simple to understand the bigger concepts here. Thousands of years ago, farmers actually couldn't rely on technological advancements And the craft of farming literally required daily manual labor, you know, um, hours and hours of movement variations every single day,
Mm-hmm.
walking, pushing, pulling, crouching, and carrying heavy items were normal parts of an individual's life. And this goes within not just our culture, but globally. Farming was a huge thing back in the day. So when we're speaking about like overall people were more active because they had to be in order to make ends meet. I'm sure many of us have even heard stories, you know, from our own grandparents, or if you've been lucky enough to hear about what your great grandparents had to go through and the glory days of farming back then. Um, Over time, though, what ended up happening was that technological advancements began to be began to one by one essentially replace physical labor in essentially all crafts that did require any manual work. I could go into depth about the evolution of strength training all day. You know,
Mm-hmm.
dumbbells came around in the 1700s, kettlebells came in the 1800s, pulley systems, and even the plate loaded barbell that came around in the 1900s, which led to the modern day gym. But for the purpose of our talk today, I'm actually going to be speaking about all of this stuff that I just mentioned in depth on Wednesday. So if you want to join me, you can reach out to me directly after this. So if you want to learn more about that stuff, Wednesday. But for today, we're going to just keep our focus on trying to understand the facts of the technological revolution that we're currently living through and are honestly lucky enough to even witness on a day-to-day basis. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, like
No,
through,
I think that's super important because, you know, in order to understand where we have evolved to as a community, we need to understand where we came from, what our lifestyles were like then. And I always like to say that we know that the problem is that there has become a mismatch behind our sedentary lifestyle now that we have and the physical needs and demands of our body that are not being met.
yeah,
And when we're looking at a problem and we're trying to solve that problem, in order to get to even addressing it, we need to understand, well, how did we get here? Right? Um, why is it important to us now? And what are the implications if we don't solve this problem? Because I mean, you've worked with so many people, and if someone doesn't understand why they're doing something, how successful are they going to be at succeeding of the in that goal of themselves?
yep.
Um, and so and so when we're talking about, so you know, back in the day, our ancestors were super active, and now we have our lifestyles where we're not as active anymore. And as my generation and, you know, our generation, we love our technology. We also have to understand that with that technology comes a lot of implications, and one of those implications being chronic diseases. For those who don't know what chronic disease is or have just heard it in the grapevine, so your chronic disease is a condition that lasts for longer than a year. Now, these conditions are diseases that require a lot of additional medical support. And oftentimes, these conditions are limiting in terms of what we can do to our active daily life. And so, you know, while there is a different array and wide array of different chronic conditions, focusing on heart health is of real importance to our community. And if you ask me why we're focusing on heart health, there are, I mean, numerous amount of studies out there. If anyone is into research and literature, you can even just Google it on Google Scholar, and you can see what is the research out there on the Sikh, the South Asian population, our Apne, what is the research out there on their health? And you will find that there's a lot of research that's been done. One of the main things is that unfortunately, South Asian population, we are already predisposed to a lot of heart diseases, meaning without even doing anything, we're at a higher risk of developing heart diseases.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, like in comparison to the European population, our population is 2 times more likely to be affected by heart disease. We
Yeah.
are about 5 times more likely than the Chinese population to be affected. So these are just facts in the sense of why should we be focusing on these things? Why are these things that we should be communicating with our parents and our grandparents? And if you think about it, when we're talking about, okay, so here's the problem, and we touched a little bit about this is how we got here. And now I think naturally the next part comes in, what can we do about it? All right, so we're predisposed to heart diseases. Simple facts being like a process called atherosclerosis. And my background being in science, I'll try to keep this as simple as possible for everyone else. But we have arteries, so essentially tunnels that carry blood to our heart. And that gives us the nutrients that we need. When we have bad lifestyles, bad habits, we have a process called atherosclerosis. And I know, Abby, you're familiar with this, but we have this buildup of plaque, fat from cholesterol that makes our arteries smaller. This process, atherosclerosis, is actually accelerated in our people. So about 25% of the heart attacks that happen in India, believe it or not, 25% of them are less than 40 years old.
Right.
Right? We're getting close to that. 40 is not old at all. So that's one fact right there. Second being that our arteries are already smaller than other populations. So biologically, we are predisposed to heart conditions. And that gives us another reason why we should be focusing on this stuff, why we need to be educating our parents into what we can do. So, I know you've dealt a lot with factors that, in terms of healthcare, are there questions that people commonly have in terms of heart disease and like, what can we do about it? How can we help?
I think the biggest thing that where I get a lot of questions are with respect to like what can people actually change versus what they can't change. So if you want to clarify some of those things, I think that would be useful information for the community right now, and then I
Yeah.
can depth about actually the physical training part.
Yeah. So when it comes to any health condition, we like to divide it into things that are modifiable and non-modifiable factors. So this means that when we're talking about any chronic condition, any sickness at all, there are certain factors that make us more likely to be getting that condition.
Right.
So within those factors, now they're not all bad news. There are a lot of things that we can't change, but there are way more things that we can change.
Right.
So for example, non-modifiable factors, these consider our age, our sex, our race, family history, genetics. Okay, we can't change that. We don't really have control over that.
Yeah.
But the good news is that there's probably double the amount of factors that we can change. So high risk factors that are modifiable for heart disease are blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity, smoking, alcohol, physical activity, um, diabetes, and then the rest coming into our psychological factors, education, socioeconomic factors. So there is a wide abundance of things that we can change, which is the good news.
Right.
And I think, um, that's where a lot of our community needs to focus on is, okay, so there's all these things that we can change. Let's change it.
Right. So in terms of change, you mentioned that physical activity was one of the one of the risk factors that we're actually able to influence. So does that mean therefore if somebody influences physical activity, improves that in their life, they have a lower chance or a greater chance to manage their condition, correct?
Yeah. So whether you already have heart disease, which is the reality of a lot of our elders in our population. So, for example, your moms, your dads, you can modify the degree at where your health condition is going. And then, like you said, the other part is that you can prevent it. You
Mm-hmm.
can prevent all of these factors that make us likely to get it. There's all these other things that we can do that can take us away from getting it.
Right. Right. So that's where my craft really comes in,
Mm-hmm.
personal training, right? Because I get
Exactly.
a lot of people, they come to me and they're just like, okay, a lot of the times people are very superficial with what they want. Oh, I want to lose my gut or I want to do this, but I
Mm-hmm.
I've always tried to have an active role in sharing the facts like what we're doing in this conversation today. It is a little bit scary that we're predisposed to all these conditions.
Yeah.
It should when I learned those facts during school as well, I was like that was the main motivation for me to get into training. And over the past few years, I've been able to evolve as a coach and really orient people's minds in a better way towards approaching health for life, strength for life. It's not just a 2 week, 4 month thing that you do to just look a certain way, right?
Yeah.
That's what brings up the conversation of exercising versus training for me. So exercise and training are actually two different things. A lot of the times people will group it as one, but exercise is like a series of movements that you complete, you get a sweat on, okay, and it's over with.
Hmm.
Whereas training is an actual structured program which is geared towards a specific goal. In our case today, it would be a training program geared towards managing high blood pressure, a training program geared towards managing diabetes.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So when I'm speaking to my students, I'm always trying to help them build a relationship with daily training in efforts to build physical autonomy for life. The term physical autonomy, some of you may have not heard of it, some of you have. That term essentially is used to describe being able, right? Like if you're 80, physical autonomy for you would be, okay, I'm able to get up, I'm able to walk around my house, I'm able to carry things, I'm able to, walk around the block and have no fear of falling or no fear of, just an injury.
Yeah.
So I believe that everybody's goals at the end of the day should be shaped around physical autonomy versus short-term aesthetic goals. If you have this
100%. Yep.
if you have this goal to be strong for life, the aesthetics are going to come as a byproduct of just having that sound relationship with training. And honestly, that's probably the biggest challenge that I have right now is people want things quickly and they don't want to think about
Hmm.
lifestyle. So, and that's why I wanted to talk about it today in this platform because it's an important concept for people to understand. And once you get it, it'll help you build momentum on your journey. Um, I also believe that training in itself is a form of meditation and self healing. It's not a chore. It's not something that you do to abuse your body and then, just deplete yourself. It should actually be a sense of nourishment. You know, in our culture, we speak about that a lot, adding to our vitality. Meditating and doing thoughts and doing all these things. Those are great too, but the physical side of it is we still gotta pour from our body. So you gotta actually refuel and recharge yourself through training. This is where I want to bring up a conversation about heart health and exercise because I'll get these questions a lot too. It's like, okay, I see tips on the internet. They tell me to walk, they tell me to do this, this, and this, but I don't really
Yeah.
understand like how, like why does that matter to me?
Yeah. Why is it important? Why should I do it?
Okay, and then this goes with so if you know high blood pressure, the clinical term for it is called hypertension. Your parents may have seen the term, or you may have seen the term yourself. There's different stages of hypertension.
Hmm.
So somebody who's considered pre-hypertensive means that they're at risk for developing high blood pressure. Somebody who is stage one hypertension, this is the type of individual who's on medication, but the doctors are also prescribing them daily physical activity and things like that to manage
Hmm.
that blood vessel that Paneet mentioned earlier. She said, they get smaller, so we want to make the blood vessels bigger.
And I think that is the stage that majority of our community, given our moms and dads, are actually at.
Pre hypertension. Most people are at pre hypertension or stage one.
Or stage one. Yeah.
Once a doctor actually diagnoses you as stage two hypertension, that means you're
Yeah.
on medication for life. So the beauty with pre hypertension and stage one, especially pre hypertension, so somebody who hasn't been fully diagnosed, they're not on medication yet. If you exercise, and exercise doesn't have to be something crazy. If you're training and you go for 5 minute, 20-minute walk daily, that has an actual physiological response in your body where it'll take that blood vessel that was like this and it'll push it open to be like this for 24 hours. That's
Hmm.
that's what's called a protective benefit of training, right? So the protective benefit of training literally opens up the blood vessel. So for somebody who's pretty hypertensive and now you start walking every day, you can take your artery that was like this and boom, now it's back to normal and it can stay here. But if you're stage one, you're stage two, and you just don't do anything about it, it just gets worse and worse. And that's when you have to rely on medication for life.
Yeah. And then that's great because that specifically takes it back because biologically, like I was saying before, we genetically have smaller arteries already. So
Yeah,
if we're thinking that, our arteries are already biologically smaller, if not beneficial for everyone out there, it's even more beneficial for our population.
yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Um, so that was my little piece on heart health and exercise. If
Mm-hmm.
you guys have questions about this stuff, please feel free to
Yeah.
comment them in the section below, and we'll circle
And
back
I
in.
I know we are focusing specifically on heart health, but another common condition within our population that I have found and a lot of research also finds is diabetes.
Hmm.
Like I'm sure many of us, we go to house parties, family parties, weddings, and how many times do we hear, the auntie and uncle say, beta, I got diagnosed with diabetes, or your friend says to you, man, like my mom just got diagnosed with diabetes. So it's very common. It doesn't come to a surprise, but what does come to a surprise is the lack of education people have towards it, even after being diagnosed about it. Because,
Right.
I mean, I'm sure you've experienced how many of your clients come to you saying, Abby, like I have diabetes and what should I do about it?
Yeah, actually recently, and it was kind of sad. I had somebody right before the whole COVID thing happened. They came to me at the start of this year and they told me that they were diagnosed. And when I asked them, what did your doctor tell you? And they were just like, not much. They just kind of diagnosed me and gave me medicine and said,
Yep.
and I was just like, I was actually shocked because they gave them no warnings, no anything. Because yes, training is essential to help manage diabetes, but if you don't know enough about it, it can also
Yep.
be dangerous because
I agree.
you could have extremely low blood glucose, extremely high. So it's a very
Yeah.
condition to manage, and kudos
Yeah.
to everybody who is going through it. Like it's a big family commitment when it comes to
Yeah.
help to manage.
But yeah, and going on that fact, for those who may not know what diabetes really is, I can give you a brief introduction to it
Yeah,
without getting into the real specifics of it. But essentially, in our body, we have glucose, most commonly known as sugar, that runs through the same blood vessels that we're talking about before.
mm-hmm.
And in a normal human or in a healthy individual, that sugar is easily and in a timely manner uptaken by our body to be put into our fat and muscle cells. In an individual who is diabetic or is at risk of being diabetic, the body is sort of in a malfunction. It's like a car that's not running correctly, and it sometimes needs a little bit of assistance. And there are numerous ways to provide that assistance in getting that done. But the main thing that we need to understand is that because that sugar is staying in our blood vessels, it can be extremely detrimental to us. And one of the simplest things in terms of reducing that and helping that is exercise.
Right,
And I tell my patients as well, and clients that, well, there's like a certain uh, to make it simple, for example, there's a receptor, and this receptor is called a GLUT4 receptor, which helps that sugar that I was talking about in the blood vessels get out of the blood vessels and go into your muscles and your fat cells.
right,
When we exercise, we improve that receptor, we help it. We help the insulin, we help the GLUT4 receptor, and as a byproduct, that sugar is getting removed out of our blood vessels and into our muscle and fat cells where it needs to be stored.
right.
And that's simply just done by exercise.
So that's
And
that same protective benefit, right?
exactly, same protective benefit. And what I would encourage people to take back from that is that, like you were saying, there are some complications when it comes to diabetes. It's a very serious condition, but just with that small amount of education, if you are diabetic, your parents are diabetic, a family member, a loved one is, do some research, get the education, and then when you go to your family doctor and your medical practitioner, tell them, I hear this is the latest research on managing diabetes. I have this education. Be that facilitator for your parents, for elders in our community, and ask them, what can I do in access to the medication? If medication is needed as an intervention, what are some natural sources of interventions that we can imply to that patient?
Right. Yeah, totally agree with you.
Yep.
Like that is that is one of the biggest. These are two of the biggest problems that we're facing in our culture right now. So
Yeah.
again, people need to know and understand the full scope of everything.
Yeah. And and with the beauty of exercise in this, there's an abundance of research to say that specifically when we categorize diabetes and we go into type 2 diabetes is reversible. And the crazy part is that it's not medication that will reverse it, it's diet and physical activity. So these are the things, instead of acting from a spot of being, scared and a fear-based approach, let's use education to be able to provide interventions for these individuals. And I think there's a question here by Sandy.
Oh, really?
What are some ways to have the older generation keep active in a safe way? And what are some small modifications we can start making in the Desi diet? Great question.
That's literally our next part.
That is our next point. So the infamous South Asian diet. Where do we begin?
Let me start with. So for the South Asian diet, I'll start with a little bit of the history before, and then Praneet will go back into the science. If you think about before when I was talking about the farming culture, right? We as a people, you'd wake up in the morning, you'd have one big, really calorically dense meal, high in fats, like our sog with a lot of butter, and then that would be your one meal,
Ghee.
ghee, everything in it. You'd go plow the fields, you do whatever farming work you have to do for like 8 hours, and then you come back and then you eat one big meal again. So culturally, right, if you think about, okay, now we're here in Canada, we're eating the exact same meals, but we're not moving at all. Right?
Watching Netflix.
Watching Netflix, we're letting our
Yeah.
we're letting our Roombas clean our floors. Like we're not as active. Technology is just taking over. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you go because I know you got something here.
I think it's funny because how many times have I had an auntie and uncle or my mom tell me, "Don't worry, we eat sabjiyan. We're on the verge of being so healthy." And I say, okay, and then when we get into it, we see, okay, so let's say 90% of our South Asian population were vegetarian, which means that our heart health should be, at the top, given how many vegetables we're eating. But that's not the case. And there's reasons as to why that is the case. So, for example, when we're making our favorite, mom's making sog, that sog is sitting on the tawa for about 5 hours. Okay. I know when my mom cooks, it's a full day thing. And what's happening is that, our naturally and chemically, the vegetables that we're cooking are filled with nutrients. Okay. Things that our diet really needs and things that are very helpful in managing the high blood pressure, the high cholesterol. But when we're cooking them in the way that we're cooking them, we're actually making our benefits suboptimal. So when we're cooking our sog for an extended amount of time, the longer processing times, we're actually killing about 90% of the nutritional value in those vegetables.
Yeah.
Second being when we are doing torka, when we're cooking our vegetables in the vegetable oil through a chemical process of the vegetable oil hydrogenation, we're actually making the vegetable oil, for lack of other words, into the bad cholesterol that we don't need. So now it's becoming that our heart health is becoming equivalent to those that are non-veg. And it really shouldn't be that way. If you're vegetarian, you should be much healthier based on what science tells us. So that being said, there's a disconnect between what we should be eating and how we're eating it. And those are the things that I think are like vital information that we should be taking back to our families and saying, mom, like, let's cook our sabjis in a healthier oil or in less oil. Let's cook our vegetables for a little bit less time, because then we can get more nutritional values out of the foods that are so good for us.
Right. You hit the nail right there, man. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So to answer Sandy's question, just some small adaptations that you can make. I mean, we are so lucky that we have so many resources available to us. Going online, finding out heart healthy food for lowering blood pressure, heart healthy food for lowering cholesterol. You will find tons and tons of information. Simple things being like start your morning off with some oatmeal. Oatmeal is a great source to help decrease that blood pressure and decrease that cholesterol. Instead of adding instead of adding fake sugar, so like your brown sugar, your white sugar, your granulated sugars, opt in for putting in bananas and strawberries into your oatmeal. Another simple thing for specifically the Indian diet is, we love our grain, we love our atta, our roti, our rice. So you can start by substituting the white rice for your brown rice, and then take it a step even further and use a substance called barley. And then you can have, your gutty and jaw a little bit healthier than what we are eating.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of common nutritional advice that I've been offering and I've been sharing with my students,
Mm-hmm.
that I've found great success with in the past. I know living in a South Asian home, it can be kind of tough because mom or whoever's cooking the food will cook it, and then you feel disrespectful if you say no.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like finding that balance between the two, right? And what I tend to tell people is, one, not to really like overthink it, because some people go very in depth with terms of like calories in, calories
Mm-hmm.
out, and that honestly I feel like it just causes more stress than it needs to.
Yeah, it can be scary.
Yeah, you just kind of get overwhelmed with all the numbers, and you're like, holy, I just ate like 3,000 calories in one meal. Like, what's gonna happen to me? So I,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely don't tell people to go that direction, but just more so looking at the portions. If like for me personally, when I lost a lot of weight many years ago, what I found was, instead of eating like 5 rotis, I would have maybe 3. And
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the advice that I'll share to people is to get actually a majority of your food in during breakfast and lunch, and then
Mm-hmm.
have like a lighter dinner. Doesn't mean don't have dinner, but just have, maybe if you're used to eating, like I was saying, 5 rotis, maybe you have 3, maybe you have 2, maybe you have a little bit more dal with no
Mm-hmm.
butter. So simple things like that. The yogurt, the
And
date.
lentils, yeah, and lentils are a great source of a lot of the fiber that we need.
Yeah, like our food is healthy. It's just
Hmm.
looking at the way we prepare it and trying to modify that just a little
Yeah,
bit more so we can make that little bit of difference. A lot of the
exactly.
potent, a lot of the potent health benefit that we'll get is going to come from just building that relationship with training, and then in turn you're going to want to take care of your body even more when it comes to your nutrition. You'll have less, you'll be less likely to like binge eat foods late at night. If you have that regimented mindset of, okay, heavy breakfast,
Hmm.
heavy lunch, lighter dinner, sleep on time. If you're up until, I know it's quarantine right now, people are probably up. I know my brothers are up to like 4 a.m. They're going to be more likely to snack for no reason late at night.
Hmm.
So just having that regimented approach towards having some type of routine, I think is vital for like people's overall wellness, emotional, physical, everything.
Yeah, and then I think the second part of that I would say is that if you are dealing with any heart conditions, your families and parents, there are a lot of registered nutritionists that are, available to us. So reach out to those individuals because your healthcare team doesn't start and end off at your family doctor. Okay, it goes
Yeah.
way beyond that. So find the individuals that are designated in that specific field and seek help from them.
Professional.
And now a lot more are, doing a lot more research in terms of how can we modify South Asian diets. So a lot of it is, okay, here's education, here's how we can cook our vegetables better, here's how we can make our roti better, here's the alterations in the atta that we can use. So there is a lot out there. We have to find it, and with the education I think we're headed in the right direction.
Sorry, just quick question. I'm not
Yeah.
seeing any of the questions pop up on my end. But was the I don't know why, but was the second part of that question something to do with elderly? You mentioned.
Yeah, so what are some small modifications oh no, sorry. What are some ways to have the older generation keep active in a safe way?
Right. Do you want to tackle that first, or should I?
Yeah. Um, I think within our community specifically, we have the privilege for a lot of us that we grow up living with our grandparents and our elders. And it is such a such an important aspect of where we can play a role in, given all of the education that we have and all of the access to resources that we have. We need to actually be helping our seniors. And we in Sikhi, we talk a lot about seva, and in times where we're quarantined, we often think like, where can I do my seva? How can I do my seva? Here's a great example of what you can do for specifically our elderly population. So when we're talking about heart health and conditions like that, it doesn't just apply to, mom, dads, brothers, sisters, friends. It also plays a huge role in our elderly population. And I think, me, like myself and you, we have these conversations a lot about how can we engage our senior population.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things is that we need to be keeping them mentally active. We need to be mentally stimulating them a lot more than what we're doing. So instead of leaving your grandparents and the TV on, having conversations with them is huge. Picking up simple tasks around the house that that you can do yourself and asking your grandparents to do it for you is a great way. So an example is that at my house, we live with my grandpa, and what we usually do is that any task that we know that we can do ourselves. So for example, we always ask him about the hose. I mean, my sisters and I are pretty cool. We can go outside, we can turn on the hose, we can do all that stuff. But we make it an effort to be like, Grandpa, can you please figure it out for us? We don't know how to do it. And it provides them this, physical autonomy to be able to do things like that, and be physically independent.
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing there is, always this goes for everybody, all the younger generation. We have to
Mm-hmm.
at the same time try to reinforce the mindset for strength and resilience versus feeding that mentality of, oh, you're old now, you're fragile. You know,
100%. Yep.
I personally like would hate that if I was 90 and somebody's trying to like put me down like that. My own grandfather is a good example for that. This guy still walks like 5 kilometers a day. He has both knees replaced. He'll waddle his way down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but he's doing his thing, and we all support that, and that's super important. When I look at like I have a personal goal. It's random, but my personal goal has always been I want to live to 100 and I want to be, physically capable at 100. I don't want to be like all shriveled up and like weak. I'm going to be strong
Mm-hmm.
because I'm going to continue moving. I'm going to continue building my relationship with training as I grow and I evolve. And that's the kind of mentality that I want to kind of cultivate in our community. Because if we
Yep.
can do that, I think that's the biggest thing that we can do for our communities. And what Paneet was bringing up about the accomplishment of a task, that's huge. Like just asking your grandfather to, grab the remote from me.
Mm-hmm.
Make them feel important. When
Yep.
I looked at researchers in Japan, um, there's I'm blanking on the name of the city, but there's a city in Japan that has the most concentrated population of the oldest people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of their data is coming off of this type of notion of just respecting the elders and giving them the space to accomplish things and do things.
Yep.
Still, like feel like they're able. They're not just
Yeah.
weak people. They
I
have
think,
wisdom. You gotta see.
yeah, you're right. I think there's a lot of prevailing stereotypes that come along with aging. And I know I've seen a lot of within our community and a lot of other communities is, in order to respect our seniors, we often feel that that comes from, no, 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 don't tell your grandpa to get up. You get it up. You're young. Why don't you go upstairs and grab it? But in actuality, we're actually being more harmful than helpful. Our intentions are right. They're coming from the right part of our heart, but the way that they're playing out are not so helpful. So, if you're making jaw, your mom's making jaw, and someone says to you, go bring the jaw to your grandparents, why not go to your grandparents, bring them with you into the kitchen and sit there and talk to them? It's just simple things like that that we can really um, provide that physical and personal autonomy for our grandparents, because otherwise we fall into this like trap of isolation
Yeah,
and dependency, and that's not good for them.
100%, man. 100%
Hmm.
good for them at all. Um, where are we here?
Yeah, Gagan here also says I live with my grandparents and encourage them to do any daily activities. I mean, that's really the key, especially during this quarantine time. It's actually a pretty good time for a lot of our grandparents because we're home all day with them.
Yeah.
And that's something that they're not maybe used to for a lot of family households. So use this time to get them up and moving, get some work done with them, maybe get them to cut the vegetables that you're going to be cooking and eating.
What was the question? I can't see them. I'm kind of sad.
No, it was just a comment based on living with grandparents and getting them to do daily activities.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Like there's many things out there. And, you know, this conversation is making me realize I'll actually be putting a lot more of my content out on YouTube that's geared towards some of this stuff because me and Praneeth
Hmm.
have worked with PCHS, Punjabi Community Health Services, in the past. I had a walking club actually with them. So there's tons of exercises that
Yeah.
stretches that you can do with your grandparents. Like even with
And not only physical activity, but even mental, you know. One of the things that we had done with the Mississauga Seniors Club is a technology group. So getting our seniors onto iPads, and we just did simple things of we made them an email, and with the email they emailed their grandkids. It was as simple as that.
that's awesome.
And yeah, and so just simple tasks like that can be really invigorating for our elderly population. And as a result, I mean, there's tons and tons of research out there that tells us that, you know, keeping people mentally stimulated helps us prevent conditions like Alzheimer's. Their heart health improves, and so we should be listening. Just at the end of the day, let's listen to science and really take for what they're telling us.
Yeah.
At this point, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to add it in the comments there below. And if you are watching this after the live is already done, I have pinned our IG handles to the comments below. So feel free to just reach out to us um, and let us know what challenges that you guys are having, um, you know, and let us know how that's going.
Yeah, like me and Praneeth, we've made ourselves available over the last few years through Instagram and just being as active as we can in the community. So definitely reach out. Don't feel shy. It could be a question totally unrelated to anything we talked about today.
Hmm.
My world is about strength training and helping people build physical autonomy with their bodies. Praneeth is on the opposite side of the spectrum with healing. But yeah, guys, feel free to ask the questions. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing them on my end, or maybe that's just because no one's saying anything.
That might be all the questions we're getting. We
Yeah,
answered everyone's questions. Yeah, but I think that wraps up our segment here. And once again, just thank you to Sikh Heritage Month for having us. You know, we hope that when things do get back to normal, that we can have something in person.
yeah, 100%. I wanted to host a session for you guys at my space with my team called the Trinity Collective. So definitely, once this is all over and we all get back to reality, I'll have you guys in my space. We'll go through a training session together, and you'll be able to experience a little bit more about my approach and how it's different than most.
Awesome. Thanks, Avi.
Awesome. Thank you,
All
Panay.
right. Bye, everyone. Take care.